A family abandons a defective puppy. Then the vet opens the carrier and screams, "Call 911!" What should have been a routine check turns into chaos when the air fills with a strange chemical smell and the tiny German shepherd stops breathing. But this isn't just a sick puppy. Something's been done to him. As alarms blare and panic spreads, one young vet assistant refuses to step back. She can feel it. Someone wanted this puppy gone for a reason. And when she starts asking questions, she discovers a truth more horrifying than anyone could imagine. What was really hidden inside that carrier? Who would use an innocent animal as a weapon? And how far will one woman go to uncover the truth before it's too late? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows of Harbor Ridge Animal Clinic as Tamsin Reeve wiped down the last examination table. The familiar scent of antiseptic filled the air, mingling with the gentle whir of the air conditioning. Just 15 more minutes until closing time. She hummed softly, looking forward to getting home to her own rescue cats. The sharp ding of the front doorbell cut through the quiet. Tamsin's head snapped up, gray-green eyes narrowing at the sound of rushed footsteps in the lobby. She stepped into the hallway just as a well-dressed couple hurriedly set down a battered pet carrier at the front desk. The woman wore expensive perfume that couldn't quite mask her nervous energy. Her manicured hands trembled as she scribbled on the intake form. The man kept checking his phone, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he couldn't wait to leave. "We need to go," the man muttered, tugging at the woman's elbow. Now. Something about their behavior made the hair on the back of Tamsin's neck stand up. After 7 years at the clinic, she'd developed a sixth sense about trouble cases. "Excuse me," Tamsin called out, quickening her pace. "We need some information about—" But the couple was already rushing out the door, leaving behind only the scratched carrier and hastily completed paperwork. The names scrawled on the form were obviously fake. John and Jane Smith. Tamsin had seen enough abandoned pets to recognize when someone was covering their tracks. "Another dump and run," she sighed, crouching down beside the carrier. The plastic was cracked and dirty, with strange dark stains along the bottom. "Poor thing probably needs shots and—" She stopped mid-sentence. Through the carrier's metal grate, she heard it. Labored, panicked breathing. Not the normal panting of a stressed animal, but something worse. Much worse. "Dr. Kincaid!" Tamsin called out, her voice sharp with urgency. "We need you out here." The older veterinarian emerged from his office, reading glasses perched on his nose. His weathered face creased with concern at Tamsin's tone. "What have we got?" "Emergency drop-off. Something's wrong with the breathing." Tamsin's trained ear picked up a wet, rattling quality that sent chills down her spine. Dr. Kincaid knelt beside her, his movements careful but quick. "Let's have a look then." His steady hands reached for the carrier's latch. The moment the door swung open, a wave of chemical fumes hit them both. The sharp, acrid smell burned Tamsin's nose and made her eyes water. Dr. Kincaid jerked back, coughing violently. Inside the carrier lay a German shepherd puppy, no more than 4 months old. Its golden brown fur was matted and dull. But what made Tamsin's heart stop was the crude line of stitches running along the pup's abdomen. Amateur work, angry and red against the skin. "Dear God," Dr. Kincaid whispered, before another coughing fit doubled him over. His face had gone pale, and he swayed on his feet. "Call 911!" Tamsin lunged for the phone even as chaos erupted around her. Sarah, the front desk receptionist, rushed to open windows, while Jason, the other vet tech, grabbed an oxygen mask for Dr. Kincaid. 911, what's your emergency? This is Harbor Ridge Animal Clinic, Tamsin spoke rapidly, watching Dr. Kincaid struggle to breathe. "We need immediate medical assistance. We have chemical exposure, unknown substance. One person down, possibly toxic fumes." The puppy in the carrier hadn't moved, its breathing growing more labored by the second. Tamsin's mind raced. This wasn't a simple case of animal abandonment. The surgical stitches, the chemical smell, the couple's suspicious behavior. Something very wrong was happening here. "Stay on the line," the dispatcher instructed. "Emergency services are en route." Dr. Kincaid had slumped against the wall, his normally ruddy complexion now ashen. Jason held the oxygen mask to his face, while Sarah propped open every window and door, trying to clear the air. Tamsin's training kicked in through her fear. She grabbed protective gloves and a surgical mask from the supply cabinet, then carefully lifted the puppy from its carrier. The little body felt too light, too still in her arms. "Hang on, sweet one," she whispered through her mask, carrying it to the emergency treatment area. "Just hang on." The sound of sirens grew in the distance as Tamsin checked the pup's vital signs. Its pulse was weak and irregular, pupils unresponsive. Whatever had been done to this innocent animal went far beyond normal cruelty. She heard the emergency vehicles pulling up outside, the rush of footsteps and equipment being unloaded. But Tamsin stayed focused on the puppy, speaking softly as she attached a tiny oxygen mask to its muzzle. "You're safe now," she promised, though her voice shook. "We won't let anything else happen to you." Paramedics burst through the door, quickly assessing the situation. They moved straight to Dr. Kincaid, who was still struggling to breathe properly. Tamsin caught fragments of their rapid questions: exposure time, symptoms, chemical characteristics. "Ma'am, we need to check you too," one paramedic called to her. "I'm okay," Tamsin insisted, though her throat burned. "Please, help him first." More emergency personnel arrived, firefighters in protective gear, a hazmat team to test the air quality. The small clinic became a whirlwind of activity and urgent voices. Through it all, Tamsin remained at the treatment table, monitoring the puppy's breathing while fielding questions from first responders. She described the well-dressed couple, their suspicious behavior, the condition of the carrier. Each detail she shared seemed to increase the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a medical emergency anymore. It was becoming clear that they'd stumbled onto something much darker. Dr. Kincaid was loaded onto a stretcher, the oxygen mask still covering his face. As they wheeled him past, he caught Tamsin's eye and managed to rasp out, "Take care of the pup." "I will," she promised, blinking back tears. "I will." The hazmat team had cordoned off the carrier, treating it like a crime scene. Police officers began arriving, taking statements from the staff. But Tamsin's world had narrowed to the small creature fighting for life under her hands. The puppy's breathing remained shallow and strained, its body occasionally trembling. Whatever had been done to it, whatever cruel experiment or procedure had left those angry stitches, was still causing damage. Tamsin knew they were racing against time. "We need to get this animal to the emergency veterinary hospital," she told the nearest officer. "There's something very wrong here, beyond the chemical exposure." The officer nodded grimly, speaking into his radio. Within minutes, arrangements were being made to transport both Dr. Kincaid and the puppy to appropriate facilities. The clinic had become the epicenter of something much larger than anyone had anticipated when that couple walked in. As Tamsin prepared the puppy for transport, she couldn't shake the image of those people hurrying away. They'd known exactly what they were leaving behind. This wasn't a simple abandonment. It was something calculated, something sinister. She stroked the puppy's head gently, careful to avoid the oxygen mask. "What did they do to you?" she whispered. "And why?" But the only answer was the continued sound of labored breathing and the controlled chaos of emergency responders doing their jobs. The sun had fully set now, leaving the clinic awash in the rotating red and blue lights of emergency vehicles. This was no ordinary night at Harbor Ridge Animal Clinic. And as Tamsin watched Dr. Kincaid's ambulance pull away, she knew nothing would be the same after this. Whatever darkness they'd stumbled into was only beginning to unfold. The evening that had started so normally had transformed into something out of a nightmare. But Tamsin squared her shoulders, focusing on the immediate need, keeping this innocent puppy alive. The bigger questions would have to wait. Right now, saving a life was all that mattered. She helped secure the puppy for transport, never taking her eyes off its chest rising and falling with each troubled breath. Whatever secrets lay behind those crude stitches and chemical fumes, she was determined to uncover them, for Dr. Kincaid's sake, and for this helpless animal that had been used and discarded like garbage. The emergency veterinary transport team arrived, their efficiency providing a small measure of comfort in the chaos. As they loaded the puppy into their vehicle, Tamsin felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. This was more than just another case. It was the beginning of something much bigger than she could imagine. The clinic erupted into controlled chaos as hazmat teams in bright yellow protective suits swarmed through the entrance. Their heavy boots squeaked against the linoleum floors, while portable decontamination equipment was quickly assembled. The sharp chemical smell still hung in the air, making everyone's eyes water. Tamsin watched in horror as Dr. Kincaid's knees buckled. 2 paramedics caught him before he hit the ground, easing him onto a stretcher. His normally ruddy face had gone pale, his breathing ragged and uneven. On the examination table, the German Shepherd puppy lay frighteningly still, its small chest barely rising. "Ma'am, you need to step back," one of the hazmat team members urged, reaching for her arm. Tamsin shook her head, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I know the decontamination protocols. We need to set up a 3-stage cleaning station. Gross decon, secondary, and final rinse. The puppy needs immediate oxygen support and cardiac monitoring." The team leader paused, studying her through his face shield. "You've had training?" "My father was emergency services. I've memorized every protocol in his manuals." Tamsin was already pulling on protective gloves, her movements precise despite her shaking hands. "We need to stabilize both patients before transport." To her relief, they listened. Within minutes, she was guiding them through the proper procedures while keeping one eye on the vital signs monitor attached to the puppy. The numbers weren't good. Heart rate erratic, oxygen saturation dropping. "Come on, little fighter," she whispered, adjusting the tiny oxygen mask. "Stay with us." Dr. Kincaid was being loaded into an ambulance, still conscious but struggling. He caught her eye as they wheeled him past. "The pup," he managed to rasp out. "I've got him," Tamsin assured him, her voice stronger than she felt. "Focus on getting better." The puppy's monitor suddenly erupted in alarming beeps. Tamsin's heart nearly stopped as she saw the cardiac rhythm becoming dangerously irregular. "No, no, no," she muttered, reaching for the emergency medications. "Don't you dare give up." Time seemed to slow as she and the emergency vet tech worked to stabilize the small patient. The puppy's heart rate dipped dangerously low, then spiked, then steadied. Each second felt like an eternity, until finally, miraculously, the numbers began to stabilize. Tamsin let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The puppy's eyes flickered open briefly, deep amber orbs filled with an unmistakable will to survive. In that moment, she knew what to call him. "Rook," she said softly, stroking his ear through her gloved hand. "Like the chess piece. Because you're small but mighty, and you don't give up." 2 police officers had arrived and were conferring with the hazmat team leader. Tamsin could hear fragments of their conversation. Probably accidental exposure, drug residue, no signs of intentional contamination. She wanted to scream in frustration. Couldn't they see this was no accident? The crude stitches, the suspicious couple, the targeted chemical exposure, it all pointed to something far more sinister. "We'll need to transfer the animal to the county shelter," one officer announced, approaching the treatment table. "Standard procedure for abandoned pets involved in potential criminal cases." "He's not stable enough to move," Tamsin argued, positioning herself protectively between them and Rook. "He needs constant monitoring and supplemental oxygen. The shelter isn't equipped for that level of care." "Ma'am, we have protocols to follow." "Then follow them tomorrow," she interrupted, her voice firm. "Right now, this puppy needs medical supervision. I'm not leaving him." The officer opened his mouth to argue further, but something in Tamsin's expression made him pause. After a long moment, he sighed. "We'll revisit this in the morning, but you need to document everything." Tamsin nodded, already reaching for the clinic's medical records tablet. She began meticulously recording every detail: vital signs, medication doses, response to treatment. The night stretched ahead, long and uncertain, but she wasn't going anywhere. Hours passed in a blur of monitoring equipment beeps and medication schedules. The hazmat team completed their sweep, setting up air scrubbers to clear any remaining chemical residue. Police photographers documented the scene, paying special attention to the Cariier that had been sealed in an evidence bag. Through it all, Tamsin remained at Rook's side. She talked to him softly, telling him stories about other animals they'd saved at the clinic. His breathing gradually became stronger, more regular. The cruel stitches on his abdomen stood out starkly against his black and tan fur, a testament to whatever ordeal he'd endured. "What happened to you?" she wondered aloud, gently checking his IV line. "What were they using you for?" The night shift emergency vet had offered to take over, but Tamsin politely declined. She couldn't explain the fierce protectiveness she felt toward this small survivor. Something about his resilience, his refusal to give up despite everything he'd been through, touched her deeply. Around 3 a.m, she received a text from the hospital. Dr. Kincaid was stable, responding well to treatment. The relief made her eyes well up with tears. She wiped them away quickly, focusing back on her patient. "See that, Rook? We're both fighters." She adjusted his blanket, making sure he stayed warm. "And tomorrow, we're going to start figuring out exactly what happened to you. I promise." The puppy's eyes opened slightly at the sound of his new name. Despite everything he'd been through, there was a spark of trust in that amber gaze that made Tamsin's heart ache. She wouldn't let that trust be misplaced. Outside, the last police car finally pulled away, leaving the clinic in relative silence. The air scrubbers hummed steadily, and Rook's monitors beeped in a reassuring rhythm. Tamsin settled into the chair beside the treatment table, prepared for the long vigil ahead. She knew she was probably breaking a dozen protocols by staying, by getting emotionally involved. But as she watched Rook's chest rise and fall in steady breaths, she couldn't bring herself to care. Sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. The night stretched on, each hour marked by vital sign checks and medication doses. Tamsin documented everything meticulously, building a record that would be impossible to dismiss as mere accident or coincidence. Whatever darkness had touched this puppy's life, she was determined to bring it into the light. As dawn began to paint the sky in soft pastels, Rook stirred slightly. His tail thumped weakly against the table, just once, but it was enough to make Tamsin smile through her exhaustion. It was a small victory, but tonight had taught her that sometimes small victories were the most important ones of all. The morning sun filtered through the clinic windows, casting long shadows across the treatment room where Tamsin had maintained her vigil. Her back ached from the uncomfortable chair, but she refused to leave Rook's side. The German Shepherd puppy's condition had stabilized overnight, his breathing now steady and strong. 2 police officers returned shortly after dawn, accompanied by a tired-looking detective who introduced himself as Detective Morris. He flipped through his notepad, barely glancing at Tamsin or the puppy. "Well, looks pretty straightforward," Detective Morris announced. "Drug residue transfer, probably from previous owners. We'll mark this one as closed." Tamsin frowned, her exhaustion forgotten. "Closed? But what about the suspicious couple? The surgical stitches?" "Ma'am, we deal with drug exposure cases all the time. Previous owners probably had contaminated belongings. Nothing indicates criminal intent." While the officers prepared to leave, Tamsin began her morning check of Rook's vital signs. As she ran the clinic's microchip scanner over him, something odd caught her attention. The device beeped twice, displaying 2 different identification numbers. "That's strange," she muttered, double-checking the readings. "He has 2 microchips." She carefully examined the crude stitches on Rook's abdomen. After years of assisting in surgeries, she could tell this wasn't done by a professional. The spacing was uneven, the technique sloppy. It looked more like someone trying to copy proper surgical procedures without actual training. "Detective," she called out, "you need to see this." But the officers were already heading for the door, their minds made up. Tamsin's shoulders slumped in frustration. She turned her attention back to the Cariier that had brought Rook to them, now sealed in an evidence bag on the counter. Something about it nagged at her. Using gloved hands, she carefully examined the Cariier through the clear plastic. The bottom seemed unusually thick. When she tilted it at an angle, a small piece of paper became visible, wedged beneath the floor panel. Her heart raced as she made out what appeared to be a phone number written in smudged ink. "What are you doing?" Tamsin startled at the sharp voice behind her. Ellis Pratt stood in the doorway, his expensive cologne overwhelming the antiseptic smell of the treatment room. The office manager's usually smooth face was pinched with irritation. "I found something in the Cariier," Tamsin explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "I think it might be important." "The case is closed," Ellis interrupted, his tone dripping with condescension. "Instead of playing detective, maybe focus on your actual job? Those floors won't mop themselves." Tamsin felt her cheeks burn, but she held her ground. "With all due respect, Mr. Pratt, something's not right here. The double microchips, the amateur surgery." "That's enough," Ellis snapped. "You're a veterinary assistant, not a police officer. Clean up this mess and get back to work. Or should I remind Dr. Kincaid about your tendency to overstep?" He turned on his polished heel and strode out, leaving Tamsin seething. She looked down at Rook, who watched her with trusting eyes. "Don't worry, buddy. I'm not giving up that easily." Throughout the day, Tamsin maintained her regular duties while keeping careful notes about her observations. She photographed the double microchip readings with her phone and documented the irregular stitching pattern. The hidden phone number burned in her memory, but she hadn't had a chance to retrieve it properly from the Cariier. As evening approached, she was finishing up some paperwork when movement outside caught her eye. A figure in dark clothing was hunched over the clinic's dumpster, methodically going through the contents. Tamsin's pulse quickened. The Cariier hadn't been thrown away. It was still inside, tagged as evidence. So what were they looking for? She reached for her phone to call security, but the stranger was already melting away into the shadows. Tamsin hurried to the window, but they were gone. The encounter left her with a cold certainty. Someone wanted that Cariier back, and they were willing to go to considerable lengths to find it. The clinic felt different now, heavy with unspoken tension. Every shadow seemed to hide secrets. Every casual interaction carried possible double meanings. Tamsin glanced at the Cariier, still sitting in its evidence bag. Whatever information it contained, she knew she had to act fast before someone came back for it. She stayed late again that night, using the excuse of monitoring Rook to remain in the treatment room. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. The double microchips suggested identity concealment. The poor surgical work hinted at underground operations. And now someone was desperate enough to search their garbage. The truth was there, hidden in plain sight like that phone number beneath the Cariier floor. She just had to find a way to prove it before it was too late. As she checked Rook's bandages one last time, the puppy nuzzled her hand weakly. Despite everything he'd been through, he still trusted, still fought to survive. Tamsin scratched behind his ears, making a silent promise. "We're going to figure this out," she whispered. "Whatever they did to you, whoever they are, we're going to find out the truth." The clinic's nighttime shadows lengthened around them, and somewhere in the darkness, she knew someone was watching, waiting, planning their next move. But Tamsin had made her choice. She would not look away, would not pretend this was just another abandoned pet case. Sometimes the hardest part of doing the right thing was being the only one willing to see what was right in front of them. The morning sun barely filtered through the clinic's windows when Detective Nora Whitcomb arrived, her oversized trench coat rustling as she strode through the door. Her sharp features were set in a mask of professional detachment, but her eyes missed nothing as they scanned the waiting room. Tamsin straightened from where she'd been organizing files. "Detective Whitcomb, thank you for coming back. I know you closed the case, but—" "5 minutes," Whitcomb interrupted, checking her watch. "That's all I can spare for theories about abandoned pets." Tamsin led the detective to the treatment area, where Rook lay sleeping. The puppy's breathing had steadied overnight, though his stitches still looked angry and raw. She retrieved her notebook and the evidence she'd gathered. "Look at these microchip readings," Tamsin said, spreading out the documentation. 2 different numbers, but only 1 incision site. And the surgical work, it's deliberately sloppy, like someone wanted it to look amateur. Whitcomb's expression didn't change, but she moved closer to examine the papers. "Go on." "There's more." Tamsin described finding the hidden phone number, the mysterious dumpster visitor, the chemical residue. As she spoke, she noticed the detective's posture shifting subtly, her attention sharpening. "And the couple who dropped him off," Tamsin continued. "They were too well-dressed for this neighborhood, too rushed. They knew exactly when we'd be closing, when there'd be minimal staff." Whitcomb pulled out her own notebook, flipping through pages. "Similar reports have come in from 3 other clinics in the past month. All purebred puppies, all allegedly defective, all abandoned with traces of synthetic opioids in their systems." She paused, fixing Tamsin with an appraising look. "And in each case, someone tried to steal back the Cariiers within 24 hours. Tamsin's heart pounded. "You knew?" "We suspected, but without concrete evidence linking the cases." Whitcomb shrugged. "Most people see what they expect to see. Just abandoned animals, tragic but routine. But you don't think that anymore, do you?" The detective's lips tightened. "Show me everything. Every detail you noticed, no matter how small." For the next hour, they pieced together the pattern. The high-end breeds, the consistent surgical techniques beneath the intentionally messy stitches, the strategic timing of the abandonments. Whitcomb produced photos from other cases, Cariiers with similar modifications, puppies with matching surgical scars. They're using them as drug mules, Tamsin said softly, scratching behind Rook's ears. Making it look like unwanted pets to move product through vet clinics. Whitcomb nodded grimly. Smart setup. Vet staff handle the carriers without suspicion. If something goes wrong, like with your pup here, they cut their losses and disappear. The carriers get thrown away or stolen back before anyone looks too closely. But why the double microchips? Insurance, Whitcomb explained. One legitimate ID to pass initial checks, one black market ID to track their inventory. We've seen similar techniques in human trafficking. Tamsin felt sick. She'd known something was wrong, but the scale of it. How many others? Too many. But thanks to your attention to detail, we might finally have enough to connect the network. Whitcomb's professional mask cracked slightly, showing a glimpse of genuine respect. Most people wouldn't have noticed half of what you did, or wouldn't have cared enough to push. I couldn't just ignore it, Tamsin said simply. Not when lives were at stake. The detective studied her for a long moment. No, you couldn't. That's why I'm officially bringing you in as a witness and consultant. Your observations could be key to breaking this case. She pulled out her card, writing a direct number on the back. Call me immediately if you notice anything else unusual, but be careful. These people are organized and desperate. They won't appreciate someone paying such close attention to their operation. Tamsin looked down at Rook, who had woken and was watching them with those intelligent amber eyes. He wasn't just an abandoned puppy anymore. He was evidence, living proof of a criminal enterprise that treated lives as disposable commodities. His survival wasn't just a miracle. It was a chance to expose the truth. I'll be careful, she promised. But I won't stop looking. Whitcomb's expression softened slightly. Good, because neither will I. She gathered her notes, straightening her coat. I'll have patrol cars increase their rounds past the clinic, and I'll need copies of all your documentation. As they compiled the evidence, Tamsin felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Finally, someone else saw what she saw. Finally, her instincts were validated. Rook wasn't just a discarded victim. He was the key to bringing down something much bigger than anyone had suspected. The detective paused at the door. Miss Reeve, trust your gut. It's already proven sharper than most trained investigators I know. Tamsin watched her leave, then turned back to Rook. The puppy's tail wagged weakly, and despite everything, she smiled. They weren't alone in this fight anymore. Whatever came next, they'd face it with allies who understood what was really at stake. She checked his bandages, noting how his eyes tracked her movements with growing alertness. We're going to stop them, she whispered. You and me and Detective Whitcomb. We're going to make sure no one else goes through what you did. The morning sun strengthened, filling the treatment room with clear light. Somewhere out there, criminals were still moving their cruel cargo through unsuspecting clinics. But now they had faces watching, minds connecting the dots, hearts determined to bring their operation into the light. Rook wasn't just evidence anymore. He was hope. The evening sun cast long shadows through the clinic windows as Tamsin checked Rook's vital signs. The German Shepherd puppy's breathing had steadied, but his recovery would be slow. A gentle knock at the door made her look up. Thought you could use some coffee, Keaton Braddock said, holding up 2 steaming cups. The EMT's perpetually worried expression had softened into something warmer. How's our patient doing? Better. Tamsin accepted the coffee gratefully. His temperature's finally normal. Whatever they put inside him didn't do permanent damage, thank goodness. Keaton pulled up a chair beside her. Doc Kincaid would be proud of how you're handling all this. He always said you had special instincts with the critical cases. Speaking of the doc, how is he? Stable. Should be home in a few days. Keaton's face darkened. Can't believe someone would do this, using innocent animals to smuggle drugs. It's sick. Tamsin stroked Rook's ears, earning a sleepy tail wag. My father would have caught it sooner. He had a sixth sense about these things. Your father? She hesitated, then decided to trust him. He was a canine trainer for the sheriff's department. Taught me everything I know about working dogs. Their body language, their psychology, how to read the subtle signs most people miss. That explains a lot, Keaton said softly. The way you handle the aggressive cases, how you picked up on things with Rook that everyone else missed. Dad always said animals speak their own language. You just have to learn to listen. Her throat tightened. He died when I was 17. Car accident on a rainy night. After that, well, vet school wasn't really an option anymore. Keaton's hand found hers, squeezing gently. I'm sorry, Tamsin, but look at what you've accomplished anyway. You're the heart of this clinic, and now you might help break open a major trafficking operation. Their moment was interrupted by Ellis Pratt's sharp voice from the doorway. Miss Reeve, a word? The office manager's usually immaculate appearance showed signs of strain, collar askew, sheen of sweat on his forehead. His eyes darted between them and Rook. The police investigation is disrupting our normal operations, he said tightly. Perhaps it would be best to transfer the animal to a larger facility. No. Tamsin stood, positioning herself between Ellis and Rook. He stays here where I can monitor him. You're just a veterinary assistant. This situation requires— Detective Whitcomb wants him here, she cut in. For evidence. Ellis's face twitched. Evidence of what, exactly? Whatever you're afraid we'll find. The office manager took a step forward, but Keaton rose to his full height beside Tamsin. Ellis retreated, smoothing his tie with trembling hands. You're making dangerous assumptions, Miss Reeve. I suggest you remember your place. My place is right here, Tamsin said quietly. Protecting those who can't protect themselves. If that makes someone nervous, maybe they should ask themselves why. After Ellis stormed out, Keaton whistled low. He seemed rattled. Good. Tamsin checked Rook's IV line. Someone's world is about to get very uncomfortable. You really think he's involved? I think he knows more than he's saying, and I think he's terrified we'll figure out exactly how much. Keaton studied her thoughtfully. You're not scared? Of Ellis? No. She met his gaze. Of what might happen to Rook if we let our guard down? Absolutely. These people have already shown they'll do anything to protect their operation. Then it's a good thing he has you in his corner. Keaton's smile was warm. And you have me in yours. Tamsin felt something flutter in her chest, but pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for distractions. Thanks. We'll need all the allies we can get. As if understanding, Rook pressed his nose against her hand. His amber eyes held a trust that made her heart ache. I won't let them hurt you again, she whispered. I promise. The puppy's tail thumped weakly against the blanket. Despite everything he'd been through, he still believed in human kindness. Tamsin swore she'd prove that faith justified. She settled in for another long night of observation, grateful for Keaton's steady presence beside her. Outside, shadows lengthened and stars emerged. Somewhere in the darkness, people who treated lives as commodities were probably planning their next move. Let them come, she thought fiercely. They'd learned that some things weren't for sale. Some bonds couldn't be broken. Some truths refused to stay buried. Rook sighed in his sleep, pressing closer to her hand. Tamsin remained vigilant, ready to protect what mattered most. Not just an injured puppy, but the chance to expose a darkness that had stayed hidden for far too long. The night stretched ahead, full of uncertainty, But Tamsin knew exactly where she needed to be, standing guard over an innocent life, carrying on her father's legacy of protection and justice, no matter who tried to stop her. The clinic settled into its nighttime quiet, broken only by the soft whir of medical equipment and Rook's steady breathing. Tamsin checked her phone. 12:15 in the morning. Her eyes felt heavy after hours of observation, but she wouldn't leave Rook alone. Not tonight. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the clinic into darkness. Even the backup generator remained silent. "That's not right," Tamsin whispered. The emergency systems should have kicked in automatically. She fumbled for her phone's flashlight, heart pounding as metal scraped against metal at the side entrance. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose. A beam of light swept past the treatment room door. Tamsin heard Ellis Pratt's voice, unnaturally high with tension. "This way. Be quick about it." She'd known he was involved, but seeing proof made her stomach turn. Moving silently, she scooped Rook into her arms, careful of his IV line. The puppy stirred but didn't make a sound, as if sensing the danger. The radiology room was closest. Thick walls, no windows, perfect for hiding. Tamsin slipped inside just as heavy boots thundered down the hallway. Through the crack in the door, she glimpsed 3 masked figures following Ellis's nervous shuffle. "Where's the mutt?" a gravelly voice demanded. "Treatment room 4, Ellis answered. "But the assistant might still be here. She's been staying late." "Find her. We can't leave witnesses." Tamsin's breath caught. She cradled Rook closer, feeling his rapid heartbeat against her chest. The radiology room's lead-lined walls would block cell signals. She couldn't call for help. They were trapped. Harsh light flooded the hallway as the intruders searched room by room. Tamsin pressed deeper into the shadows, praying they'd pass by. But then she smelled it. Gasoline. The sharp chemical stench made her eyes water. "Smoke her out," the gravelly voice ordered. "Near the oxygen storage. That'll get her moving." Ellis's protest was weak. "The whole place could go up." "That's the point. Insurance will cover it. Now shut up and watch the door." Tamsin's mind raced. The oxygen tanks were just 2 doors down. If they started a fire there, the explosion would take out half the clinic. She had to move. The first wisps of smoke curled under the door. Rook coughed weakly, his breathing growing labored. The puppy's recent trauma made him especially vulnerable to smoke inhalation. She had to protect him. But how? The fire alarm's shriek split the air. Smoke was thickening fast. Too fast. They'd used an accelerant. Tamsin pulled her scrub top over her nose and mouth, but Rook was struggling for every breath. "Check the radiology room." The order came through the chaos. Footsteps approached. Tamsin looked frantically around the pitch-black room. The old manual resuscitation bag hung on the wall. She grabbed it by feel, praying it still worked. Rook went limp in her arms. No, 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 no. She laid him on the cold floor, positioning the mask over his muzzle. 1 breath, 2, 3. The smoke burned her lungs as she forced air into his. "Come on, buddy," she whispered between compressions. "Stay with me." The door handle rattled. Tamsin kept working, tears streaming down her face. She wouldn't let him die. Not like this. Not after everything. Rook's chest shuddered. A weak cough. Then another. His eyes fluttered open, confused but alive. The door burst open, flashlight beam cutting through smoke-filled darkness. Tamsin curled protectively over Rook, still giving him assisted breaths. If these were her last moments, she'd spend them saving him. But the voice that came wasn't the gruff intruder's. It was Detective Whitcomb's. "In here! We need medical now!" Sudden light flooded the clinic as power returned. Emergency responders swarmed in, containing the fire before it could reach the oxygen storage. Tamsin kept ventilating Rook until paramedics took over, her arms shaking with exhaustion and relief. "Ellis Pratt," she managed to tell Whitcomb. "He let them in. We know," the detective said grimly. "He tried to run when he saw us coming. Big mistake. The others didn't get far either." Keaton appeared through the smoke, face streaked with soot. He wrapped a blanket around Tamsin's shoulders, supporting her as her legs threatened to give out. "Rook?" she asked. "Stable. You saved his life. Again." Keaton's voice was thick with emotion. "You saved a lot more than that, actually. The evidence they were trying to destroy? It's going to bring down their whole operation." Tamsin nodded, too drained to speak. She watched as emergency crews worked, as Whitcomb's team collected evidence, as Rook received oxygen therapy. The puppy's eyes never left her. She'd kept her promise. She'd protected him. And in doing so, she'd helped expose a truth that would save countless other animals from the same fate. Her father would have been proud. In the quiet aftermath of the fire, Harbor Ridge Animal Clinic hummed with the gentle whir of air purifiers. The acrid smell of smoke still clung to everything, but at least they could breathe easier now. Tamsin sat cross-legged on the floor of the recovery room, carefully examining Rook's surgical site. The German Shepherd puppy lay quietly on a thick blanket, his trust in her evident in his relaxed posture. "You're being so brave," Tamsin murmured, gently cleaning around the crude stitches with warm saline. The incision was healing, but poorly. Whoever had operated on him had been in a hurry, caring little for proper technique. Detective Whitcomb stood in the doorway, notebook in hand. "How's our star witness doing?" "Better than expected, considering everything." Tamsin dabbed carefully at a spot where the stitches had pulled slightly during their escape. "The smoke inhalation could have been devastating, but his lungs are clear now." "That's one tough pup." Whitcomb moved closer, crouching down to observe. "Have you noticed anything else unusual while treating him?" Tamsin nodded slowly, her trained eyes catching something as she worked. "Actually, yes. Here, under his belly fur." She parted the black and tan hair carefully, revealing a pale patch of skin near his groin. At first glance, it looked like nothing, just lighter skin. But as she cleaned away some dried antiseptic, faint green marks became visible. "Is that—" Whitcomb leaned in closer. "A tattoo." Tamsin's heart rate quickened. "It's mostly faded, but these are definitely professional breeder marks, the kind used in legitimate kennels to track bloodlines." She grabbed her phone, snapping several clear photos before the squirming puppy could hide the marks again. The numbers were barely legible, but they were there, proof that Rook had come from somewhere official before falling into the wrong hands. Whitcomb's expression sharpened. "Can you make out any of it?" "Give me a minute." Tamsin enhanced the photos, zooming in. K9-17, something, -BR. Her hands started shaking as recognition hit. "Oh my God. What is it?" "These are Blue Ridge markings. Blue Ridge Canine Training Center. They supply police departments all over the state." Tamsin's voice cracked. "My father used to work with them before he died. They're one of the most respected breeders of police dogs in the region." "Blue Ridge?" Whitcomb was already typing on her phone. "They reported a break-in 3 months ago. Several pregnant females and young puppies were stolen. The case went cold when there were no demands for ransom." Rook whined softly, sensing Tamsin's distress. She stroked his head automatically, mind racing. "They didn't want ransom money. They wanted Cariiers, living ones that wouldn't trigger drug dogs because they were drug dogs themselves." "The perfect cover," Whitcomb agreed grimly. "Who would suspect a purebred police puppy? and by spreading the story that they were defective culls, no one would look too closely at abandoned problem dogs. Tamsin felt sick. But Rook wasn't weak or defective at all, was he? They chose him because he was strong, because he had the right temperament to survive what they did to him. She thought about how steady he'd been during the fire, how he hadn't panicked or given away their position. Even now, recovering from surgery and smoke inhalation, his eyes were alert and focused. This wasn't a reject. This was a carefully selected specimen. The whole narrative falls apart, Whitcomb said, already dialing her phone. If we can prove these dogs came from Blue Ridge, we can trace the whole operation back to whoever infiltrated their breeding program. This isn't just about drug trafficking anymore. It's organized theft of police assets. Tamsin hugged Rook gently, mindful of his injuries. They almost killed you to keep this secret, but you're going to help us stop them, aren't you, boy? Rook's tail thumped against the blanket. Despite everything he'd been through, there was an unmistakable strength in his bearing, the heritage of generations of working dogs bred for courage and resilience. Keaton appeared in the doorway, carrying fresh bandages. Everything okay in here? His vitals are due for a check. Better than okay. Tamsin's voice was fierce with conviction. We just found the missing piece. Rook isn't evidence of their crimes. He's evidence of where they came from. And he's going to help us take down the entire operation. She carefully rewrapped Rook's healing incision, her touch gentle but her resolve hardened. The puppy had survived so much: surgery, abandonment, fire, not because he was defective, but because he was exactly what his breeders had intended him to be. Strong, steady, and brave. The false narrative of the unwanted runt had protected the traffickers for months. But now, thanks to a faded tattoo and Rook's incredible resilience, that story was crumbling. In its place, a much darker truth emerged, one that would lead straight to the heart of the trafficking ring. Whitcomb was already coordinating with Blue Ridge's security team, her voice urgent but controlled. Evidence technicians would be arriving soon to document everything. But for now, in the quiet recovery room, Tamsin simply held Rook close, marveling at the depth of deception they'd uncovered. You were never broken, she whispered to him. You were chosen, and now you're going to help us make this right. Rook's steady gaze met hers, full of intelligence and trust. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The underestimated vet assistant and the supposedly defective puppy who would bring down an entire criminal enterprise. The truth had been hidden in plain sight all along, written in fading green ink under black and tan fur. Now that they had found it, there would be no more hiding, no more lies. Justice would finally come for those who had tried to twist something noble into something cruel, and Rook would lead the way. Detective Whitcomb stood in the dimly lit interrogation room, her gaze fixed on Ellis Pratt. The office manager's polished exterior had cracked, revealing the frightened man beneath. His two clean shoes scuffed nervously against the floor as sweat darkened the collar of his expensive shirt. We have security footage of you letting them into the clinic, Whitcomb said, her voice level, but sharp. Arson. Attempted murder. Those aren't white-collar crimes, Ellis. You're looking at serious time. Ellis's hands trembled as he dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief. You don't understand. I didn't have a choice. The debts. They said they'd hurt my family. Then help us stop them. Whitcomb leaned forward, her presence filling the small room. Give us something we can use, and we'll work with the DA on your charges. Tamsin watched through the one-way glass, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected Ellis to break so quickly, but fear was a powerful motivator. The same man who'd dismissed her concerns now looked small and defeated. Ellis swallowed hard. There's a meet scheduled, tomorrow night. Storage facility off Highway 23, Unit 315. They're bringing in new merchandise. Whitcomb's expression hardened. More puppies? Yes. They said these ones are special. Premium stock. Ellis wouldn't meet her eyes. They wanted me there to verify the delivery. I have the access codes, the timeline. Tamsin pressed closer to the glass. More dogs like Rook. More victims of this twisted operation. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. Whitcomb gathered her files. We'll need everything. Times, contacts, protocols. If you're holding anything back... I'm not, Ellis's voice cracked. Please, I'll tell you everything. Just protect my family. Outside the interrogation room, Tamsin intercepted Whitcomb. I need to be there. Absolutely not. The detective shook her head. This is a police operation now. Think about it, Tamsin pressed. These people know dogs. They'll spot uniformed officers or anyone who doesn't move right around animals. But me? I'm invisible to them. Just another worker bee they won't look twice at. It's too dangerous. I can read handler body language better than any of your officers, Tamsin interrupted. I grew up around K9 training. I know their protocols, their movements. I'll see things your team might miss. Whitcomb studied her for a long moment. You understand what you're asking. This isn't like staying late at the clinic. These people are killers. They tried to burn me alive, Tamsin said quietly. I know exactly what they are. But those puppies need someone who understands them. Someone who can tell if they're injured, drugged, or worse. The detective's shoulders sagged slightly. Your expertise could be valuable, but I need your word you'll follow orders exactly. No heroics. I promise. Tamsin met her gaze steadily. I just want to help end this. An hour later, they were in the station's tech room. A young officer carefully fitted Tamsin with a hidden camera, disguised as a button on her work vest. The lens was barely visible, but would capture everything she saw. Testing, the tech officer said, adjusting his monitors. Video feed is clear. Audio level's good. Whitcomb handed Tamsin an earpiece. This stays in at all times. You'll hear my voice giving directions. If I say abort, you walk away immediately. No questions. Tamsin nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. This was really happening. She was stepping beyond her role as a witness, becoming an active part of the operation. The weight of that responsibility settled over her like a heavy cloak. The storage facility has multiple access points, Whitcomb continued, spreading out a map. We'll have teams here, here, and here. She marked positions with quick X's. You'll approach from the main entrance, using Ellis's codes. Act natural. You're just there to help with a delivery. What's my cover story? Ellis called in sick, asked you to fill in. Keep it simple. The less you have to fabricate, the better. They spent the next hour going over protocols, signals, emergency procedures. Tamsin absorbed it all with the same focused attention she gave to learning new veterinary procedures. Lives depended on getting this right. Get some rest, Whitcomb finally said. Tomorrow will be intense. But sleep proved elusive. Tamsin lay awake, thinking of Rook recovering at the clinic, of other puppies enduring the same cruel surgeries. She thought of her father, who'd dedicated his life to training dogs to protect and serve. What would he think of how that noble purpose had been corrupted? The next evening came too quickly, and not quickly enough. Tamsin parked her old Honda in the storage facility's lot, exactly as planned. The setting sun cast long shadows between the rows of identical metal doors. Her hands were steady as she punched in the access code Ellis had provided. Video feed established. Whitcomb's voice came through her earpiece. Remember, you're just there for a routine pickup. Stay casual. Tamsin walked down the concrete corridor, her footsteps echoing. Unit 315 was near the end. She could hear voices as she approached. 2 men, discussing numbers and weights. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. No longer just a vet assistant, no longer a bystander. She was now an operative, eyes and ears for justice, walking willingly into danger to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "The buyer here yet?" one voice asked. "On their way. This better be worth the risk after that mess at the clinic." Tamsin rounded the corner, her heart thundering but her face composed. The moment of truth had arrived. Everything that followed would depend on her ability to maintain this facade, to be the invisible worker they'd always underestimated. She thought of Rook's courage, of Ellis's cowardice, of her father's dedication to doing what was right, no matter the cost. Then she stepped into view, ready to help bring down the organization that had caused so much harm. The hidden camera recorded everything as she approached Unit 315, where 2 men stood beside a panel van. Inside, she knew, were more puppies like Rook. Future victims, unless she helped stop this now. "Ellis sent me," she said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "I'm here for the delivery." The 2 men at the storage unit eyed Tamsin with a mix of suspicion and dismissal. One was tall and wiry, wearing work boots that looked too expensive for a delivery job. The other had the thick neck and watchful stance of security muscle. "Ellis didn't mention sending anyone," the tall one said, taking a step toward her. Tamsin kept her voice steady, channeling years of dealing with difficult clients at the clinic. "He's got that stomach bug going around. Called me an hour ago. Said you needed help moving some specialty carriers?" Through her earpiece, Whitcomb murmured, "Good. Keep them talking. We're getting visual confirmation on all subjects." The security man grunted and jerked his thumb toward the van. "Check the manifests first. Need signatures." As Tamsin moved closer, she could hear faint whimpers from inside the carriers. Her heart clenched, but she maintained her neutral expression. The hidden camera captured everything: the stacked crates, the suspicious setup, the men's faces. A car door slammed outside, followed by footsteps. Tamsin's breath caught as she recognized the couple who had abandoned Rook, the woman in her designer coat, the man with his practiced smile. But behind them strode someone who made her blood run cold. Rhett Coulson carried himself with casual authority, his ice-blue eyes scanning the scene. He wore ranch boots that probably cost more than Tamsin made in a month. Everything about him screamed success and confidence, except for the predatory calculation in his gaze. "Evening, folks," he drawled. "Let's make this quick. Our buyers are on a schedule." Through her earpiece, Whitcomb's voice was tense. "That's him. Rhett Coulson, major player in cross-border trafficking. Stay calm, Tamsin. Teams are in position." Tamsin busied herself with the manifests, noting how the paperwork disguised drug shipments as veterinary supplies. Her camera captured every detail as she moved between the carriers. Some held puppies, all purebred, all valuable breeds. Others contained hidden compartments that reeked of chemicals. "These need to move now," Coulson was saying to the couple. "After that mess at the clinic, we can't risk—" He broke off, staring at Tamsin. Something flickered in those cold eyes. Recognition? Suspicion? Her heart hammered, but she kept her face blank, pretending to check another manifest. "Don't react. Don't show fear." "You," Coulson said softly. "You work at Harbor Ridge." The security man's hand moved toward his waistband. Tamsin forced herself to look confused. "Sorry? I've seen you there, when we dropped off that defective shepherd." Coulson's voice hardened. "What did Ellis really tell you about tonight?" "Team's moving in," Whitcomb said in her ear. "Hold position." Tamsin started to back away, but the security man blocked her path. The woman in the designer coat gasped. "Rhett, she's wearing a wire. Look at her vest." Everything exploded into motion. The security man lunged for Tamsin as she dove behind a stack of Cariiers. Shouts and running footsteps echoed through the storage unit. "Police! Freeze!" Officers in tactical gear swarmed in from multiple directions. The security man went down hard as 2 officers tackled him. The well-dressed couple tried to run but were quickly cornered. Guns clattered to the concrete floor as suspects were pinned and cuffed. Tamsin stayed down, heart pounding as chaos erupted around her. Through her earpiece, she could hear Whitcomb coordinating the teams. "Secure all suspects. Check those Cariiers. We need EMTs for possible drug exposure." Coulson had his hands up, that confident smile still in place as officers approached him. But something in his posture made Tamsin's skin crawl. He looked too calm, too satisfied. Then she heard it, an engine revving outside the storage facility. A second vehicle they hadn't known about. "Detective!" she called out. "There's another—" The sound of squealing tires cut through the night. Whitcomb was already moving, barking orders into her radio. "Second vehicle confirmed. All units respond." In the sudden stillness after the chaos, Tamsin looked at the Cariiers they'd seized, at the struggling puppies who would now have a chance at real homes. They'd dealt a major blow to the trafficking ring, but that second truck meant their victory wasn't complete. Through her earpiece, she could hear the pursuit being coordinated, units responding from all directions. But her focus remained on Coulson as officers led him away. Despite being in handcuffs, he still wore that unsettling smile, like he knew something they didn't. The storage unit buzzed with activity as evidence teams moved in. Tamsin helped identify which Cariiers needed immediate veterinary attention. Her camera had captured everything: the operation, the suspects, the proof they needed to shut this ring down for good. But that revving engine echoed in her mind. Someone had escaped. The question was, how much of the operation had escaped with them? The thunderous crash of metal on metal shattered the night. Through the open storage unit door, Tamsin saw a massive black pickup truck ram through the facility's security gate, sending chunks of twisted metal flying. Police vehicles scattered like leaves in a storm, trying to avoid the collision. "All units, suspect vehicle heading east." Whitcomb's voice crackled through Tamsin's earpiece. "I need backup at the—" The transmission cut off as strong fingers dug into Tamsin's arm, yanking her backward. Her heart lurched as she found herself staring into Rhett Coulson's ice-blue eyes. Somehow, in the chaos, he'd slipped his cuffs. The security team that had been guarding him lay motionless on the concrete floor. "Don't move!" Coulson hissed, pressing something hard against her ribs. The cold metal of a handgun sent shivers down her spine. "Or this gets messy." Outside, sirens wailed as police units split up, some pursuing the fleeing truck, others maintaining a perimeter around the storage facility. But inside the unit, time seemed to slow to a crawl. "Walk," Coulson ordered, steering her deeper into the maze of stacked Cariiers and crates. His grip was like iron, professional and precise. This wasn't the first time he'd handled a hostage. Tamsin's mind raced. The camera in her vest was still recording. If she could keep him talking, keep him visible. "They'll have the building surrounded in minutes." "Minutes is all I need." His voice carried that same unsettling confidence. "My people know what they're doing. That truck is just the first distraction." As if on cue, multiple explosions rocked the night. Car alarms, she realized, rigged to detonate in the parking lot. More units would have to divert to secure the area, thin the perimeter even further. Coulson dragged her to a stack of wooden crates near the back wall. These were different from the Cariiers, larger, sturdier, with air holes drilled in precise patterns. He slammed the butt of his gun against one crate's corner, splintering the wood. "Since you're so interested in our operation," he said, "let's give you a front row seat." Another strike, and the crate's side split open. A German shepherd puppy tumbled out, landing in a limp heap on the concrete. Its chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, sedated, just like Rook had been. But this one was freshly drugged, no surgical scars visible. "Simple choice," Coulson said, pressing the gun harder against her ribs. "That pup's got about 3 minutes before the sedation becomes lethal. You can try to save it, or you can walk out of here alive. But not both." Tamsin stared at the unconscious puppy, her medical training automatically cataloging symptoms. Shallow breathing, pale gums, too still. The overdose was severe. Without immediate intervention, the puppy wouldn't survive. "Clock's ticking," Coulson taunted. "What's it going to be, your life or another stray nobody will miss?" Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "The mark of true character isn't what you do when it's easy. It's what you choose when everything's on the line." Tamsin took a slow, deliberate breath. "You're right about one thing," she said carefully. "It is a simple choice." She let her body sag slightly, as if giving in to fear. Coulson's grip loosened just a fraction, exactly what she'd hoped for. In one fluid motion, she dropped her full weight downward while driving her elbow up and back. The impact caught Coulson in the solar plexus. As he stumbled, she twisted away, using the momentum to slam her heel down on his instep. The gun discharged with a deafening crack, the bullet embedding itself in a nearby crate. Tamsin didn't waste a second. She dove for the puppy, scooping it up as she rolled behind a stack of Cariiers. Another shot rang out, splintering wood inches from her head. "That was stupid," Coulson snarled. "Really stupid." Her hands moved automatically, checking the puppy's vitals while her mind raced. The sedation was dangerously deep, but she knew the protocol. She needed to get its circulation moving, stimulate breathing. "You could have walked away." Coulson's voice moved closer, stalking between the rows of Cariiers. "Instead, you'll both die here. And for what? Some mutt that was never meant to survive anyway?" Tamsin kept her movements silent as she massaged the puppy's chest, encouraging blood flow. Her other hand found the pressure point behind its jaw, a trick her father had taught her for rousing unconscious K9s in the field. "You're just like all the others," Coulson continued. His boots scraped on concrete as he searched. "Thinking you can change things, make a difference, but you know what? The system always wins. There's too much money involved. Too many people getting paid to look the other way." The puppy's breathing strengthened slightly under Tamsin's hands. She pressed harder on the pressure point, silently willing it to wake up. Just a little longer. "I'll rebuild the operation," Coulson said. "Bigger than before. Different routes, different clinics, and nobody will even remember your name." A soft whimper escaped the puppy's throat. Tamsin froze, but it was too late. Coulson had heard. His footsteps turned toward their hiding place. "There you are," he said softly. Tamsin clutched the puppy closer, shielding it with her body as she prepared for the worst. But before Coulson could round the corner, a new voice cut through the darkness. "Drop it, Coulson!" Detective Whitcomb stood in the storage unit doorway, weapon trained on Coulson's back. Behind her, tactical officers moved in silently, covering every angle. "It's over," Whitcomb said. "Your second team just crashed into a roadblock 3 blocks away. Everyone's in custody. Drop the gun, now!" For a long moment, Coulson didn't move. Tamsin could almost see the calculations running behind those cold eyes, weighing options, looking for angles. Finally, the gun clattered to the floor. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said, as officers moved in to secure him. "This goes deeper than you can imagine." "Maybe," Whitcomb replied. "But thanks to Ms. Reeves' camera feed, we've got enough to start unraveling it. Every word you said is on record, every threat, every admission." As they led Coulson away, Tamsin kept working on the puppy. Its eyes were starting to flutter open, awareness returning. Another life saved, another piece of evidence preserved. Whitcomb knelt beside her, eyes softening at the sight of the reviving puppy. That was incredibly brave, and incredibly reckless. Had to be done, Tamsin said simply, checking the puppy's strengthening pulse. Some choices are simple that way. Emergency response teams swarmed the storage unit, documenting evidence and treating the injured security officers. The puppy in Tamsin's arms was fully awake now, looking around with increasing alertness. "You knew he'd underestimate you," Whitcomb said. "Used it against him." Tamsin nodded, remembering Ellis's dismissive attitude, the way people always seemed to look past her. Sometimes being underestimated is an advantage, especially when it matters most. She gathered the puppy closer, feeling its heart beat strong and steady against her chest. Proof that sometimes the simplest choices were also the most important ones. Tamsin felt her heart hammering against her ribs as Coulson's gun pressed deeper into her side. The cold metal bit through her thin scrubs, but her mind remained oddly clear. Years of handling frightened animals had taught her that panic was the enemy. Stay calm, assess the situation, find leverage. The storage unit's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across stacked carriers and medical supplies. The sedated puppy lay motionless on the concrete floor, its shallow breathing barely visible. Tamsin knew she had maybe minutes before the dog's condition became critical. "Move," Coulson growled, shoving her toward the back of the unit. "Since you're so concerned about these mutts, you can help me load them up." Tamsin stumbled forward, letting him think she was more frightened than she actually was. Her eyes darted around, taking in details others might miss. The way the carriers were stacked on rolling pallets, the industrial-grade wheel locks keeping them in place, the slight incline of the concrete floor. "Please," she whispered, making her voice shake. "The puppy needs help. The sedation's too strong." Coulson's laugh was cold. "That's the point, sweetheart. Can't have them making noise during transport. Now start moving those carriers." As they moved deeper into the unit, Tamsin positioned herself carefully. She needed to get him in exactly the right spot. The pallet brake was just within reach, its metal lever catching the dim light. "These ones first," Coulson indicated with the gun, gesturing to a stack near the wall. "And don't try anything stupid. I've dealt with enough bleeding hearts to know all the tricks." Tamsin nodded meekly, bending to examine the carriers. Her fingers found the brake release as she pretended to struggle with the first container. "The oxygen's too low in here," she called out, her voice carrying the prearranged signal. "These dogs need ventilation." She heard the whisper of movement behind the storage unit's thin walls, tactical teams shifting into position. Coulson was too focused on her to notice. "Stop stalling," he snapped, taking a step closer. "Perfect." In one swift motion, Tamsin yanked the brake release. The heavy pallet of carriers, no longer secured on the sloped floor, rolled forward with devastating momentum. Coulson's eyes widened in surprise as 200 pounds of metal and plastic slammed into him. His gun hand was caught between two carriers, the impact producing a sickening crack. The weapon clattered to the ground as he howled in pain. "Police! Don't move!" "Detective." Whitcomb's voice rang out as officers swarmed through both entrances, weapons trained on Coulson. He was pinned against the wall, face contorted in rage and agony, his right wrist clearly broken. Tamsin was already moving, racing to check on the sedated puppy. Its breathing had weakened during those tense minutes. She began chest compressions, speaking softly as she worked. "Come on, little one, stay with me." The storage unit erupted into controlled chaos. Officers secured Coulson while others documented evidence and began examining the carriers. Many contained sedated puppies, all bearing signs of crude surgery similar to Rook's. Detective Whitcomb knelt beside Tamsin, watching her work on the unconscious puppy. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen," she said quietly. "How did you know the Cariiers would hold?" "Physics," Tamsin replied, not taking her eyes off her patient. The puppy's heartbeat was growing stronger under her hands. "And I've moved enough heavy crates to know how they fall. Sometimes being just support staff teaches you things they don't cover in training." Whitcomb's radio crackled with updates. The second crew had been captured. Evidence teams were en route. But Tamsin barely heard any of it, focused entirely on the small life beneath her hands. The puppy's eyes were beginning to flutter. "Get me a rescue kit," she called out. "And we need transport to emergency vet services. All of these dogs will need treatment for sedation and evaluation of their surgical sites." As the scene unfolded around her, Tamsin felt a profound sense of rightness. This was why she'd pushed so hard, why she'd refused to let go when others dismissed her concerns. Every life mattered, even the ones others saw as disposable. The puppy under her hands took a stronger breath, then another. Its eyes opened fully, confused but alive. One small victory in a larger war, perhaps. But to Tamsin, it meant everything. She'd chosen to risk everything for this moment. And watching the puppy's strength return, feeling its heart beat steady and true beneath her fingers, she knew she'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. Emergency response teams arrived, bringing equipment and medical supplies. The storage unit transformed into a temporary triage center as they began assessing and treating the rescued dogs. Tamsin worked alongside them, her expertise with post-operative care proving invaluable. Through it all, Coulson's broken wrist served as a fitting symbol, the power of unexpected strength, the way determination could overcome brute force. Just as Rook had survived against the odds, these puppies would get their chance at life too. Detective Whitcomb coordinated with evidence teams, ensuring every Cariier, every document, every detail was properly documented. The case against Coulson and his network would be ironclad. Thanks to Tamsin's hidden camera, they had his confessions, his threats, and now physical evidence of his operation. "You know," Whitcomb said to Tamsin as they watched Coulson being led away in handcuffs, "sometimes the most effective law enforcement doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes it's just someone who refuses to look the other way." Tamsin smiled briefly, already focused on the next puppy needing care. There would be time for reflection later. Right now there was work to be done, lives to save, and a promise to keep. The same one she'd made to Rook that first night. No one would be left behind, not on her watch. Through the chaos of the storage unit, a familiar bark suddenly pierced the air. Sharp, commanding, and full of purpose. It was Rook. Keaton had brought him, knowing the German Shepherd's keen senses might prove useful. The sound echoed off metal walls, freezing everyone in place. Even Coulson, still writhing from his broken wrist, fell silent. Rook stood at the entrance, his black and tan coat gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Despite his recent surgery, he held himself tall, amber eyes locked on the scene before him. "Down on the ground," Detective Whitcomb commanded, moving swiftly to secure Coulson, while other officers rushed to handle his associates. The trafficker's face twisted with rage as cold steel handcuffs clicked around his uninjured wrist. Keaton worked methodically through the Cariiers, his EMT training evident in how he assessed each sedated puppy. "Most are stable," he called out, "but they'll need immediate veterinary care. Similar surgical patterns to what we saw with Rook." Tamsin moved between Cariiers, helping Keaton check vital signs and document conditions. "Same stitching technique," she noted, anger coloring her voice. They were using these puppies as living containers, just like they did with Rook. Outside, commotion erupted as two of Coulson's couriers attempted to flee through a back exit. Rook's bark thundered again, more forceful this time. The sound startled the runners, making them hesitate just long enough for pursuing officers to tackle them to the ground. "Good boy, Rook," Tamsin whispered, watching as more handcuffs came out. The German Shepherd's intervention had helped seal the capture of the entire ring. From victim to victor, his journey had come full circle. Detective Whitcomb read Coulson his rights, her voice carrying clear satisfaction. "Rhett Coulson, you're under arrest for drug trafficking, animal cruelty, assault with a deadly weapon." The list continued as she led him toward a waiting patrol car. "You think this changes anything?" Coulson snarled over his shoulder. "There'll always be another way, another route." "Save it for your lawyer," Whitcomb cut him off, no longer interested in his threats. Emergency veterinary vehicles began arriving, their lights painting the night in rotating colors. Keaton coordinated with the rescue teams, ensuring each puppy was properly stabilized for transport. His gentle efficiency spoke of years handling critical situations. Rook patted, closer to the carriers, nose twitching as he investigated his fellow survivors. He seemed to understand these were others like himself, innocent lives caught in a cruel scheme. His presence had a calming effect on the puppies that were beginning to stir from sedation. "The whole operation collapsed in minutes," Tamsin marveled, watching teams document evidence. "All because one little pup was left behind at our clinic." "Sometimes the smallest things trigger the biggest changes," Keaton replied, carefully lifting another groggy puppy into a transport carrier. "You saw what others missed. You wouldn't let it go." "Neither would Rook," Tamsin said, reaching down to scratch behind the shepherd's ears. "He fought to survive that first night, even when things looked hopeless, and now he's helped make sure no other dogs will suffer the same fate." Teams worked through the night, dismantling the trafficking operation piece by piece. Every carrier was photographed, every document logged, every puppy examined and treated. The evidence mounted, building an insurmountable case against Coulson and his network. Rook stayed close to Tamsin, watching the proceedings with alert interest. His transformation from dying victim to key player in the ring's downfall seemed to mark a turning point, not just in the case, but in how people viewed the connection between animal cruelty and larger crimes. The storage unit, once a hub of criminal activity, now served as ground zero for healing and justice. Each rescued puppy represented a small victory, each piece of evidence another nail in Coulson's coffin. And through it all, Rook's presence reminded everyone why they had fought so hard to bring this moment about. In the weeks following the raid, Harbor Ridge Animal Clinic gradually returned to normal, but with notable changes. Dr. Lyle Kincaid made a steady recovery, his weathered face showing new determination as he resumed his duties. The chemical exposure had left him with some respiratory issues, but his spirit remained unbroken. "I always knew you had exceptional instincts, Tamsin," he said one morning, watching her check Rook's healing incision. "But you've proven yourself far beyond what anyone could have expected." Ellis Pratt's trial became a turning point in dismantling similar operations across the state. Despite his initial role in the scheme, his testimony proved crucial. He detailed the entire network, from corrupt breeders to international connections, his voice shaking as he described how debt had led him into complicity. Local media descended on the story, with headlines highlighting the connection between animal abuse and drug trafficking. The coverage led to increased scrutiny of breeding operations, and within months, 3 more facilities were seized by authorities. Each raid uncovered similar surgical scars on puppies, confirming the widespread nature of the trafficking method. Through it all, Tamsin maintained her quiet dedication. She still cleaned kennels, still worked overtime without complaint, still put the animals first. But now, when she spoke in staff meetings, people listened. When she suggested improvements to protocols, they were implemented. Her expertise, born from years of careful observation and genuine care, finally received the recognition it deserved. Rook's rehabilitation progressed remarkably well. His surgical scars faded to thin lines beneath his thick coat, and his eyes sparkled with renewed energy. He became a fixture at the clinic, following Tamsin from room to room, his tail wagging as he greeted patients and their owners. His presence served as a living reminder of both the darkness they'd faced and the light that had overcome it. "You know," Detective Whitcomb remarked during a follow-up visit, "sometimes the best heroes are the ones who never wanted recognition in the first place." On a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after the raid, Tamsin sat in the back row of the K-9 detection training facility, her notebook open and ready. Course materials covered the desk before her, and Rook lay contentedly at her feet, his tail thumping softly against the floor. The morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching the silver threads now scattered through his black and tan coat, battle scars that had healed into badges of honor. Detective Nora Whitcomb appeared in the doorway during the lunch break, her familiar trench coat rustling as she approached. Her usual stern expression softened at the sight of Rook, who lifted his head in recognition. "Look at you two," Whitcomb said, pulling up a chair. "From clinic assistant to K-9 handler. Can't say I'm surprised, though." She reached into her coat and withdrew an envelope. "Speaking of which, I heard you're applying for the county's new animal welfare investigation unit." Tamsin nodded, her gray-green eyes brightening. "I figured it was time to make it official, doing what I've always done, but with real authority behind it. That's why I'm here." Whitcomb placed the envelope on Tamsin's desk. "My letter of recommendation. Though after everything that happened, I doubt you need it. Your actions spoke louder than any words I could write." Rook stood up, pressing against Tamsin's leg as she opened the envelope. Her fingers traced over the official police department letterhead, and she smiled, remembering how far they'd both come. "You know, it's funny," she said quietly. "They used to call him Defective to hide what he really was. Now when I hear that word, I think of something else entirely." "Oh?" Whitcomb raised an eyebrow. "Undefeated," Tamsin replied, scratching behind Rook's ears. "Because that's what we both turned out to be." The German Shepherd's amber eyes met hers with unwavering loyalty, the same fierce spirit that had helped him survive now directed toward protecting others. Together, they had transformed from overlooked outcasts into a trusted team, their partnership living proof that courage and compassion would always find their way into the light. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.